a couple days ago, I had a conversation with a bunch of friends of mine, and we all focused on art as being part of our subject. And there was a major focus on the importance of art and how it expresses beauty in a way that we don't have in other places, obviously. Whereas, the way you do a physical craft, lay bricks or lay tile, there's a beautiful aspect to that. And there's a lot of skill, but more of like the physical art or music has a much more poetic way of expressing all of these ideas and brings people in contact with these transcendentals in, again, a more obvious way. And so there was a major importance put on that. And I didn't feel like the other side got represented as well. Which is, music isn't the most important thing, or art is not the most important thing as we know of art culturally, right? Because art can mean a whole bunch of things to a whole bunch of people. And my intuition always has been art is the tangible stuff. It's the painting, it's the drawing, it's the books. But when you get into like writing essays, well, I have a hard time kind of squaring that away as art. Even though it is, I'm always super hesitant. But for our case, we're not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to talk about what I am confident enough to call art as art. And so we have this kind of box of things that we kind of put a lot of value on. But what is the point of art? Right? It's not just to be beautiful. It's to have some sort of impact in the world. If I just made art and kept it to myself, that's all well and good. But there's something important about sharing art. That art is something that's meant to be interacted with. It's present in the world and people can engage with it. And so if its meaning is located outside of itself, then that can't be the best possible thing. Like, it has to be pointing to something greater. And this is why I think it's incorrect to keep pointing to art as this kind of monolithic good. Even if it's really good art, if it's not pointed to something, it doesn't have a lot to stand on. And this is my response to what I think is that thing. It's people's lives. I'm trying to avoid specific ways of talking about this and trying to keep this simple. But all art is meant to do is, have people interact with it and change the way we think about things so that we act in a way that's in accordance with that. And so when I make art, my desire is that it wakes people up to a certain amount and gets them to notice something they haven't noticed before. And maybe, just maybe, if they notice that thing, they can recognize it and change it. For example, someone who I've been kind of interacting with a little bit lately has been a guy by the name of Brendan Graham Dempsey. Among many other things, he wrote an epic poem about the death of God. In his poem, he's processing, what does this mean? How do I interact with it? And the goal is not to just say, oh, this is a beautiful piece of art, and we should just kind of think about it and have it be aesthetically in the background. No, this piece of art that he created is supposed to provide somewhat of an answer to this question that he's been struggling with, simultaneously encouraging people to react to it and to challenge it. And hopefully we all grow out of this experience of this art. And good art causes us to, again, engage, not to be disconnected, but to be fully connected and integrated. That's what good art is, at least in my framework for it. And so what is that when we're fully engaged and we are changing and we are becoming better? Is what I would say. I'm not going to define it any more than that, because that would warrant a whole video on its own. What does it mean when we're trying to become better? I'd say that's what maybe traditionally we would call like sainthood. You'll hear that in a bunch of religious traditions, both in Christian but then non-Christian. You'll hear that in Buddhist circles, and you'll hear that in Hindu circles as well. This idea of a person who has met their potential, maybe would be the right way to say. That's what I think is what all art should strive to do, is to have each person come a little closer to their potential, like what they can become. If there's like a best possible version of you, to bring you a little bit closer to that thing. I've been kind of processing Mr. Rogers lately, and I brought this up during this conversation, and I don't know if this got interpreted correctly, but Mr. Rogers will say things like, you know, you're the best at something, even though you might not feel that's the case, but you are, and that thing is being you. There's no one else in the world like you. There's only one you, and no one else can be like you. You're unique. You're specially made. And this is the idea I think that Mr. Rogers is trying to get at, is that each person has a unique path in front of them. It's not all the same. It doesn't follow the same patterns. And so we each have a lot of work to do to find out what that path looks like in our own lives. Because if we don't know, like we can't just take a story, right? Reading about St. George and the Dragon or Harry Potter, and we can't apply that directly. Even if it was like a fully kind of grounded, realistic book, it would only get us so far. But we can take the patterns of these things and apply them, and that requires engaging with these stories to actually delve into the story and fully understand it. And then once we fully understand that, then we can kind of go to other stories and see the pattern playing out. And then once we have this pattern, we can apply it to our own lives. And that's what art is really useful for. That's one major thing that art is there for, is to help us recognize the transcendentals, and draw us closer to them. If we weren't drawn closer to them through the act of art, there is some use, maybe, in pure aesthetics. Just, I like looking at pretty pictures. But I think I'd rather have people like living fully, like humans being fully alive, I'd rather have than have art, if I had to choose. Good thing I don't, because I think art is amazing. But I think that should be the philosophy of all this art. And I don't think art can be intentioned that way. You have to have a certain amount of processing where you're at and saying, this is where I'm at. I am going to take this thing I've been thinking about and write it into my art. And I'm not going to have an answer fully laid out, but I want to ask the question and show how I am responding and how things would play out. And in that, it gives people room to come in, ask the same questions, and recognize the truth or the lies in your work, and then do that with you. It's an invitation to play. And so I hope that you all take this as an invitation to play. I have a lot of kind of bits and pieces I want to work on the next few days, and some conversations, and this has always been my hope, is that people would take the time to engage and actually process these things and not have something going on in the background, but to be fully embodied and being active in the consideration of these big ideas. If I was to go a little bit further, I think that's one of the scary parts I see about this day and age, is that people often get distracted, and you can put your words on it, NPC or normie. I think those are kind of pejorative, but they capture some of the the idea that I'm going for, which is people are very content where they're at. And if they're not content, they are willing to push the responsibility elsewhere. But there's something about taking on a burden and being responsible for it that is essential to becoming the best you can possibly be. And so that's my invitation to all of you, is to take on this burden with me of being willing to wrestle with hard truths, to be uncomfortable, and to tell the truth, to say, you know what, no matter what, I am going to tell the truth, because I know that no matter what the truth is, it'll lead me somewhere better. And that's an act of faith. That's truly an act of faith, but that's what I found to be true so far, is that through deconstruction, it seemed like it was going bad, and I've gone through nihilist phases, but as soon as I was willing to ask the question, the answer came. It was only when I was honest enough to ask the question. And so, this is for myself as much as any of you. But thank you all for listening, and I will see you in a bit.